Hi, welcome to part three. You're probably like, oh my gosh, so many lectures. No, but by now you should be um, well into the readings, and this is just a bonus of a kind of a combination of what we should have talked about in week three a little bit, as far as with families and the dynamics of middle and high school students in the middle of why we would use the models that were suggested in the previous lecture. So, to get us started, I want to quickly let us start thinking about who the students are within this setting. I think that it's critical for us to kind of consider that middle and high school are crazy. It's a crazy stage of development. I thought the SEM aspects of that model, the school-wide enrichment model, would be a little more effective for this setting because of the fact that students actually need to lead a lot of the decisions concerning their education to feel like they are a part of their learning experience. I felt that the model through the measuring tool, the total, what is it called? Sorry, the total talent portfolio, which we'll take a couple look at those. But I thought that would be a good way to ensure that students are active and engaged in the process. And then it also enables educators to prepare students for leadership roles by changing from teacher of knowledge to facilitator of educational experiences. And then it has the potential to engage both general and gifted education students within the same setting. So um, if you didn't know, my background is in secondary education. I've spent my entire academic career studying, learning, and ensuring that I knew what would be best for teaching in these settings because I really did not have a clue about what it meant to be an educator. And I was really young when I started teaching. So my ideas about what a teacher were solely based on my experiences as a student. And I loved my favorite teacher, Mrs. Duffy. And I hated Mrs. Frank because she was super mean. And Mrs. Thompson, who told me, oh, you talk too much. And I remember their names many, many decades later because they influenced the way I thought about teaching. But I wanted to teach since I was a little girl, but I didn't know exactly what that meant. So getting into this profession, I made it a study, and I have continued to make it a study to ensure that we are providing them their best services. So this is a delicate, I feel like it's the most delicate area of education. Although I spent time 2 years teaching preschool, which gave me even more of a passion to teach secondary education. Not because it was bad, but because it helped me see the sequence of, except for elementary school, the sequence of the development of a child over time and how they all want to learn, and how it's just that it's our responsibility as educators to find the best ways to encourage that learning. So let's get started here. So the challenges with this model in a middle school and high school setting are the structural approaches that are required. So the fact that a school-wide integration will be a difficult thing, especially with turnover rates. It's not easy teaching in middle school or high school. I always say that people who love teaching in middle school are crazy. Me, myself included, because seventh graders drove me up a wall and down. But I will say that integrating something school-wide does take staff that are trained and also a part of the school, and sometimes retention is hard, not just because the teacher wants to quit, but also because of budgetary reasons that take away staff positions. So the structural process that is continuous. So it does require you to start at one end and then continue throughout the duration of the student's academic career. And that may not always be possible, especially if documentation is not a part of the support, which it should be as according to the model. Especially if someone leaves, you have a gap in what happened with a student and how are their needs being met. And then knowledgeable educators who are well versed in methods of teaching and growing the skill of students who are gifted and talented. This is a huge one. I don't see a lot of gifted or talented GATE certified teachers. So, and I don't even know if it's something that's advertised at the middle and high school level. But I do feel like this kind of shortchanges these environments because it could. I've seen what is it called? Other specialty programs that where they've hired someone just for that particular program, but for you to get a teacher that specializes in gifted and talented, I mean, you're really lucky. Compared to a lot of settings who can barely get a nurse to be on staff full time. So, and then the complex social and family challenges. Uh, it seems like not that these changes don't occur in elementary school, but it seems like students are faced with a variety of family dynamics that highly impact their growth and development within their education setting, and also the fact that they are learning how to be who they want to be. That's an extreme amount of growth while they're physically changing and mentally adjusting. And then inclusive settings have huge range of student abilities. So it's at this level typically where a lot of the learning abilities or disabilities start to become heightened because the student goes from one or two changes in teachers and classes to 6 or 7 in one day, and that's a huge adjustment, especially in middle school. High school, they get a little more adjusted, but they have other things that change for them that really project their possible skill development academically that can't always be changed in the academic setting. So there's a lot going on in these two settings. Give me a moment to wipe my eye. Sorry. Okay, so considerations for managing the learning process in secondary and education settings. Middle and high school education years where students experience the most social, emotional, and physical changes. Middle school in particular, like I just said, involves coming of age experiences where students are maturing and learning who they are separate from their families. And this is a critical step in development. So it seems like a negative, especially when you're trying to teach a lesson at 8 a.m. in the morning and little Suzanne is more concerned with what Sally's saying about what happened yesterday at lunch. But the truth of the matter is that they kind of need to develop an identity outside of their family, and this starts in the 6th and 7th grade levels. High school students are in the stage of development where independence is highly sought and also sometimes forced upon them due to family dynamics. We have a huge population of students who are homeless. And subject to all kinds of changes based on things that occur within their family. And then educators must consider all of these challenges as they design a classroom learning experience. So I know you're probably thinking, what the heck can I do to facilitate learning in these environments? If you are currently a educator in these settings, these are questions that you probably come across in your mind all the time. How do I manage these environments? I have been very successful in managing classroom environments, and I've done very bad. And it didn't matter what year of teaching I was in. That's why I want to emphasize. So you may be a veteran in the profession, but the population determines how you facilitate the learning experience. So in my mind, there is no, last year could have been great, but this year's a new year and you have different dynamics and different students and different families that you're serving. So you may be able to pull from last year, but I would encourage you to get into the habit of expanding your skills beyond for each year. One of the things I like to do is think of the year as new. every year because my students and my families are new. Even if I knew them last year, they've changed and they've developed. I don't know if you've ever seen a seventh grader become an eighth grader over the summer. It's like they grow like 20 inches. You're like, is that you? So they're different, and their family dynamics are different. So how you serve them should be modified for that. But here are two things that I have learned that have worked effectively throughout my experiences as an educator, which is to facilitate, don't create, and integrate student-centered discussion. Student-center everything into all aspects of your teaching. So there are two things that I really, 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 really like. That I've kept for years, and this is one of the books I'm going to make reference to. And then the other book I don't make reference to, but I've actually learned a lot from this book, which I really found very engaging. I put the reference at the bottom, but I've read it a few times, and I used it in our summer program to prepare pre-service teachers who were enrolled in our ARL program to get them ready, because ARL is very fast and quick, and it's boom, and then you're in the program and you're teaching, and a lot of them experience failure right away because they don't have the 2, 3, 4, 5 years of the actual preparation, which is traditional for traditional education programs, which is something that I was a part of coming from New York State. So entertaining an elephant is a great way to kind of rethink who you are as an educator, and also what it means to educate, especially high school settings. So let's get into it. Being a facilitator means. So this book I thought was really, really instrumental in helping me figure out how to engage my students. And because of so I mentioned all the developmental, the family, and the social aspects that impact students at this level, especially middle school, because you need to consider those things and also change the way you think about teaching if you haven't already. And I don't mean allowing them to express themselves. I mean flipping from educator to facilitator. And how my week would work is, once I've introduced a concept, the students take charge in developing that knowledge. So you saw in the last course we had a teach back. Well, those were a part of my lessons all the time, because I don't like to lecture more than 10 minutes for students, because they can't handle it. And in addition to that, they feel like they have a lot to contribute too. So how do you balance the two? Well, being a facilitator of knowledge is a lot easier to integrate them into the learning experience instead of you being the only creator of knowledge. Facilitating the process of acquiring knowledge means you set the conditions for dialogue to transpire. However, you play a back role in generating aspects of knowledge. So you set the guidelines for the conversation. You may choose the way in which the conversation will take place. However, the students are the conversation havers, meaning you are silent. And that is like a super hard thing to do, but it's important because this is how they develop their academic voice, and they also engage in taking charge of their learning experience. And it allows you to be able to increase and also delegate how they socially engage in your class. So that's the really big trick. I had a student-centered classroom setup from day one because I didn't want to fight my students. I knew that they were social. I knew that they needed to engage. So over the years, I developed possibilities for them to be able to be who they are naturally, but within a controlled setting. Meaning I set the dialogue conditions, but they had a chance to engage in dialogue. So some of the ingredients that you need, remember that you're the guide, you're not the actual person talking. So you may not necessarily agree with the direction that the conversation might go into, but you can prepare your students for the direction that it needs to go in. So for example, you might set discussion cues, discussion questions. You may set a discussion leader that is really good at kind of getting everyone's attention and redirecting them. You participate by listening, thinking, recording questions, and creating some of your own questions during the exchange of dialogue that you can bring up later while you participate in a whole group summary. And then you maintain a safe and respectful environment. And the safe environment doesn't mean that everyone has to agree, because that's not reality. A safe environment means that students feel comfortable having a conversation. I can't tell you how many classes I've been in where students don't have academic discourse. They are not comfortable having conversations in class because it hasn't been something that this teacher has prepared them for. Your students by high school know a lot of information. A lot of it is regurgitated from the year after year. 6th through 8th, I mean, everyone has the reader guides. It's literally the same skill sometimes, and they just keep moving it further up, but it's not new information. So here's where the students can be leaders, especially if you're a 6th grader who's already advanced. I mean, what interest do you have in a class where it's still talking about the story plot line? Hello, that is boring. So what you need to do is kind of consider, well, how do I create and sustain an environment where my students can speak openly and be the people who are creating the knowledge source, meaning they're taking your lectures and then they're making it into their own and connecting what they know to what they're learning. All right, so next, what are student-centered discussions? And I know you're probably thinking, I already know this. Do you? Because I've found that as educators, we sometimes miss the subtle things that actually define the approach. So student-centered discussions help students develop intellectually and socially. That means they are purposefully situated for the student to develop something critically and also socially, meaning that they should be talking to their peers. There should be academic discourse between their peers in a way that enables them to grow and develop. So it can be kind of awkward. I've been in Socratic seminar situations where there's like crickets, but you have to allow that that awkwardness to grow into leaders in your class, into speakers in your class. And students are very smart. So they know that you're uncomfortable and they will continue to be uncomfortable, and then you'll just jump in and say, hey, no, I don't want anyone to stay silent for about 10 minutes. But the truth of the matter is that maybe you have to redesign how they speak. So having 1 minute where they share out and discuss a question and then growing that time period. So it's about you managing it. But the key thing is that they are developing intellectually and socially. And they are great. Student-centered discussions are great teaching approaches to enhancing and engaging education activities. So say, for example, you have a really interesting topic about math, and I know I bring up math because sometimes people think math can't be grown into discussion, but it can. And you can have a student in a Socratic seminar that says what are the best approaches to solving these types of questions, and you can give the student the actual direct the answers, and then have them kind of walk through the process and have them discuss why it's the best approach, what other people think, and then what's the actual answer and how they got to that answer. But the key thing is that they're talking, and it is enhancing the activity. Student-centered discussions are also a great approach to differentiating instruction while adding rigor, because they allow students to wrestle with ideas and engage open-ended questions together through dialogue. So if you can't have an open-ended question, have it be broad enough to where they can engage in it and wrestle with the ideas. You can give them pointers. Some of my activities would center around questions, conversation starter questions for students who are a little more shy, and I would have them write before they talked so that they would have something to contribute and didn't feel as hesitant to participate. But they are really good use. They do have a really good use in classes, especially in the middle and high school setting. Tips and tricks to classroom management. So don't fight the need to please peers and interact. So one of the things that I think educators do the most of is they try to conform students. And the truth of the matter is, you spend probably too much time doing that because the student is going to be a student. Developmentally, they should be where they are. Some of them may be a little more immature than what you like, but developmentally, they are growing into the people that they need to be. The growing part is the part we have a hard time, I guess, conceptualizing, because it doesn't look the same for everyone, but it needs to happen. So you need to actually create opportunities for students to develop their social identities and peer relationships with academic skill building, meaning it needs to be integrated, which is why student-centered discussions or discussions centered within the student experience are so easily adapted, because it allows that to happen. And then you also need to design classroom activities that empower academic speaking and exchange of dialogue. Students are social butterflies, but when they come into the classroom, they're either talking about all the wrong things or not talking about what is important at the time. So you need to find a way to integrate their dialogue with the actual academic goal of the day, instead of trying to fight the fact that they're chatty. Make the chatter about something that's relevant in class. Redirect their energy. So here's some tips that I have for you to try. This book actually has a lot. It's a really great tool. It helped me to learn how to really do facilitation. But seminar folders, right before you talk, I mentioned that. Stop and try, role play, round robin to check for understanding and clarity, pair share throughout different activities, peer planning, peer coaching. There's so much out there, but do not limit yourself in your comfortability in regards to taking a step back. You will be surprised. I've seen in professional development how this can work, and I've also tried it myself, and it does. Once you coach your students and you show them how to do it, by October, November, they can be pros at it, and they can really have some really great conversations that enhance the learning experience. Now, when we think about gifted students, this is more important, because if you have a gifted student that's a speaker and a leader, they can help to facilitate the discussion aspects of the Socratic seminar, or the fishbowl, or they can be a lead within the discussion itself, in the lead facilitator. So it's really a genius way of allowing you to differentiate for them without actually having to overplan. You can include them in the planning process. One of my skills as an educator is to kind of forget that, when they have a mistake and when they, do things that they shouldn't do, I kind of forget and still give them a second chance. I can still see the negative and the positives, or I would say the challenges and the strengths that they have. And I'm still able to encourage a student to be a leader. So I have met with students where they are the people who lead the discussion, and I'll tell them, hey, we can meet before class so that we can talk about what you're going to do in class and how you're going to lead the discussion. There have been times where I've talked for 10 minutes and out of a 40 or 50-minute session, because my students were trained enough to be able to facilitate the conversation and take control. If you're the only person talking in class, your job is not going well, because you'll be hoarse, voice will be strained, and also students are engaging, students are talking, and in middle school, that's all they want to do for the most part. They want to talk, they want to learn, they want to gossip. It's just the way it is. So you kind of have to integrate that dialogue aspect into everything that they do. And then finally, here are the resources that I mentioned. I really do encourage you to read Entertaining an Elephant, as it is one of my favorites, and challenging us to change our notions as an educator. And you are doing great work so far, but these tools and suggestions are really just to enhance your experience and make them better. Thank you.